Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktivedanta. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktivedanta. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna Chaitanya. Shri Krishna Chaitanya. Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhar, Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktivedanta. Krishna. It's all about the holy name. Harinama, 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 Eva Kivalam, Kilona Stevan, Atiranyata. In this age of Kali, the Harinam Sankirtan is the only way. It's the only way. It's the only way. Krishna. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna. Everything we do, all sacrifices we make, all rituals we perform, all religious functions, whatever we give away in charity, everything that we do, Krishna says, you do as an offering to me. And in this age, he's incarnated in the holy name, Krishna. It's all meant to bring us to the point of Krishna consciousness, being able to call out for Krishna. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama. And Krishna's ambassador, who has spread this message worldwide, opened temples for Krishna, translated with commentary, books to bring us to the right conclusion that Krishna is what is to be known. So this is a reading from Biography. It's a 6-volume set, Srila Prabhupada Lilamrta by Satsvarupa Goswami, disciple of Srila Prabhupada. And these were the early years before coming to the West. It's volume 1. And Prabhupada is in India. And we heard about his child, we heard about his birth and his parents and his activities, childhood activities. And now he is in college, Scottish Church's college. So A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, he doesn't have that name yet. His name is Abhay Charan Dey. That's his birth name. He was born with that name. So, in the class 1 year ahead of Abhay was a very spirited nationalist, Subhash Chandra Bose. So they're in college, and Subhash Chandra Bose, they don't like the British occupation. They don't like the British rule. The British don't have a very high opinion of the culture, the Vedic culture in India. They think it's backward. And they think the people are lazy and like this. They don't understand the Vedic culture in India. And they're occupying India. So there's a resistance movement, an opposition arising up in the colleges. So in the class 1 year ahead of Abai was a very spirited nationalist, Subhash Chandra Bose. He had been a student at Presidency College, but had been expelled for organizing a student strike against a British professor who had repeatedly abused Indian students. At Scottish churches, Bose appeared to be a serious student. He was secretary of the Philosophy Club and was working cooperatively with Vice-Chancellor Urquhart. From Subhash Bose and others, Abai heard talks of Indian independence. He heard the names well known in his native Bengal. Bipin Chandra Pal, who had fought to repeal the Arms Act. Surendranath Banerjee, who startled the British with his agitation against the 1905 partition of Bengal. Lala Lajpat Rai, and most notably Mohandas K. Gandhi. Scottish Churches College was strict in forbidding anti-government propaganda, but the students were sympathetic to the cause of Home Rule. Although there were no open signs of rebellion, students sometimes held nationalistic meetings in secret. When Subhash Chandra Bose urged the students to support the Indian independence movement, Abai listened. He liked Bose's faith in spirituality, his enthusiasm and determination. Abai wasn't interested in political activity, but the ideals of the independent movement appealed to him. Many Bengali speakers and writers expressed India's drive for independence, Swaraj, as a spiritual movement. For the nationalists, political emancipation was analogous to the soul's liberation from material bondage. Abai was interested in devotional service to Lord Krishna, the Absolute Truth, a conviction he had imbibed from his father and maintained since his childhood, whereas Indian independence was a temporary relative truth. But some of the leaders of Swaraj were admitting that the Vedic scriptures were indeed absolute, asserted that the original glory of Indian culture could not shine forth for the world's benefit until India became free from the stigma of foreign rule. The foreigners, they pointed out, blasphemed and castigated the preeminence of Indian culture. Abai had felt this also. In his assigned reading in M. Ghosh's England's Work in India, he had encountered the theory that the Vedic scriptures were impure, recent writings, and that India's had been a spiritually backward culture before the British rule and the spread of Christianity. There were many British insults against the Shastras, such as Abai's professor trying to discount the law of karma. But if India could gain national freedom, then everyone, not only Indians, but the entire world could benefit from India's highly evolved Vedic culture. The call to Swaraj, although covert, attracted virtually all the students, and Abai among them. He was especially interested in Gandhi. Gandhi always carried a Bhagavad Gita. He daily read from Lord Krishna's holy words and spoke of being guided by the Gita above all other books. Gandhi's personal habits were pure. He abstained from intoxication, meat eating, and illicit sex. He lived simply, like a sadhu. Yet he seemed to have more integrity than the begging sadhus Abai had seen so many times. Abai read his speeches, followed his activities. Maybe Gandhi could carry spirituality into the field of action. The Gita's truth, Gandhi proclaimed, belonged in a more prominent place, where the Gita not only could be read, but could work for everyone's freedom. And the symbol of that freedom was Swaraj. Nationalist sympathies at Scottish Churches College remained underground during Abai's years as a student. It was a prestigious school. A student had to study very seriously to obtain a degree there, and he could then look forward to a fine career. To speak openly against British rule and in favor of independence meant to risk being expelled. To lose education and career, only the most rebellious would dare. So the students met undercover and listened to revolutionary leaders. We want Swaraj. We want independence, our own government, our own schools. Gurmohan watched his son with concern. He saw Abai not as one of hundreds of millions of instruments meant to change India's political destiny, but as his pet son. His first concern was for Abai's welfare. While world events moved across the stage of history, Gurmohan concentrated on his son's future as he hoped it would be, and as he had always prayed it would be. He was planning for Abai to become a pure Vaishnav, a devotee of Radharani. He had taught Abai to worship Krishna and be pure in character, and arranged for his education. Now Gurmohan thought of getting him married. According to the Vedic system, a marriage should be carefully arranged by the parents, and it should take place before the girl reaches puberty. Gurmohan had gotten his first daughter married in her 9th year, his second daughter at 12, and his third daughter at 11. When his second daughter was going on 12, Rajani had said, "I shall go to the river and commit suicide if you don't get her married at once." In the Vedic system, there was no courtship, nor was the couple allowed to live together during the first years of their marriage. The young girl would begin serving her husband by cooking for him at her parents' house, and come before him to serve him his meal, or by taking part in some other formal exchange. Then, as the boy and girl grew to physical maturity, they would become so lovable to each other that they would be inseparable. The girl would naturally remain faithful to her husband, since she would have no association with any other boys as she grew into puberty. Gurmohan had many friends in Calcutta with eligible young daughters, and for a long time he had been considering a suitable wife for Abai. After careful consultation, he finally chose Radharani Dutt, the daughter of a Suvarna Vanik family associated with the Mullaks. Radharani was 11 years old. After the meeting between her father and Gurmohan, both families agreed upon the marriage. Although Abai was a third-year college student with no income, it was not uncommon for a student to marry, and he had no immediate financial responsibilities. Abai didn't appreciate his father's choice of a wife. He had thought of marrying another girl, but in deference to his father, he put aside his reluctance. For the time being, he was living with his family, and she was with hers. So, his marital responsibilities of supporting a family would not be immediate. First, he had to finish college. During his 4th year at Scottish Churches, Abai began to feel reluctant about accepting his degree. As a sympathizer to the nationalist cause, he preferred national schools and self-government over the British institutions, but he could see that, as yet, no such alternatives existed. Gandhi, however, was calling on Indian students to forsake their studies. The foreign-run schools, he said, instilled a slave mentality. They made one no more than a puppet in the hands of the British. Still, a college degree was the basis of a life's career. Abai weighed the choices carefully. Gurmohan didn't want Abai to do something he would later regret. He had always tried to plan the best for his son, but Abai was 23 and would have to make this decision for himself. Gurmohan thought of the future. The horoscope said his son would be a great religious preacher at age 70, but Gurmohan did not expect to live to see it. Still, he had every reason to accept the horoscope as accurate, and he wanted to prepare Abai. He tried to plan things accordingly, but there was no way to guess what Krishna would do. Everything depended on Krishna. Krishna was above nationalism, above planning and the laws of astrology, and above the desires of a modest cloth merchant aspiring to make his son a pure devotee of Srimati Radharani and a preacher of Srimad Bhagavatam. Although Gurmohan had always allowed Abai to do what he wanted, he had also carefully guided him always on the path he knew was best. Now, without interfering with Abai's decision about college, Gurmohan set about to arrange good employment for him, regardless of what else happened. In 1920, Abai completed his 4th year of college and took the BA Bachelor of Arts exam. Afterwards, with the ordeal of final examinations behind him, he took a short vacation. To fulfill a long cherished desire, he traveled alone a day's journey by train to Jagannath Puri. So there's a little account here by Srila Prabhupada. He says, "Every day of my boyhood, I used to think, how to go to Jagannath Puri and how to go to Vrindavan. At that time, the fare was, for Vrindavan, 4 or 5 rupees, and similarly for Jagannath Puri. So I was thinking, when shall I go? I took the first opportunity to go to Jagannath Puri." He walked along the same broad street where for thousands of years the Rath Yatra procession had passed. In the marketplaces displayed small carved and painted wooden murtis of Lord Jagannath. Although it was not Rath Yatra season, tourists were purchasing souvenirs, and in the temple they purchased Jagannath Prasad. In the Jagannath temple, 56 gigantic offerings of cooked rice and vegetables were presented daily in worship before the deities of Jagannath, Balaram, and Subhadra. Abai entered the temple and saw the deities. On a side altar stood the murti of Lord Chaitanya in his 6-armed form, manifesting himself simultaneously as Krishna, Rama, and the sannyas, Lord Chaitanya. Lord Chaitanya was famous in Puri, where he had spent his last 18 years of life conducting Hare Krishna Kirtan with his followers and dancing ecstatically at the yearly Rath Yatra as the carts were wheeled along the main road, surrounded by thousands of devotees. Lord Chaitanya had danced and swooned in the ecstasy of his intense love in separation from Lord Krishna. Passing over the parade route, Abai recalled his own childhood pastimes, singing and dancing in the street, the miniature cart, the procession, Jagannath smiling, his father and mother, Radha Govinda. Somehow the fame of Lord Jagannath had inspired him as a child and had remained within him all these years. When shall I go to Jagannath Puri? His childhood dreaming of Puri and Vrindavan and his compulsively studying the train tables, scheming since the age of 5 to travel here, were based on more than just a desire to tour Puri's marketplace, and he was not satisfied by seeing the deity in the noisy, crowded temple. He had been impelled to come to Puri as a pilgrim, and his motive was his devotion to Krishna. Now, nationalism was strongly influencing his life, and he had recently married and was facing the decisions of graduation and career. Yet, here he was, hardly more than a boy walking alone in Puri, where Lord Chaitanya had lived, where Lord Krishna's Jagannath still resided. Abai relished his break from the pressure of duties in Calcutta. He didn't know how the love he felt for Krishna and Krishna's pilgrimage place would fit into his life. He knew that Krishna was more important than anything else. He was God. Hariva, the supreme controller and everyone's inner guide. But there was so much token, superficial service to God. Even the nationalist speakers, although they carried the Gita on their person, were more intent on nationalism than Krishna. Only those who were sincere devotees knew the importance of attraction of Krishna. People like his father. An odd incident occurred at Puri. Gaur Mohan had given Abai a letter of introduction to an acquaintance who lived in Jagannath Puri. Abai went to see him and was well received. When the man was offering him lunch, however, Abai noticed a small lump within one of the cooking pots. He questioned his host, who replied, "Oh, it is meat." Abai was unable to restrain his shock. "No, what is this? I've never taken meat." Abai looked at his host in astonishment. "I never expected this at Jagannath Puri." Ashamed, his host said, "I did not know. I thought this was the best." Abai pacified the man, but he put his food aside and took no more meals there. After that, Abai ate only the Jagannath Prasadam from the temple. Abai stayed in Puri for 3 or 4 days, wandering around the holy places and visiting the famous Puri seaside, with its sparkling beach and strongly pounding surf. Several times he recognized some of the priests from the Jagannath temple as they smoked cigarettes, and he heard of other unsavory activities of the sadhus connected with the temple. What kind of sadhus were these who ate fish with the Jagannath Prasadam and smoked? In this respect, he found Jagannath Puri disappointing. When Abai returned home, he found his young wife crying. Then how her friends had told her, "Your husband's not coming back." He told her not to worry. There was no truth in the story. He had only gone for a few days, and he was now back. Although his marriage had only recently begun, Abai was dissatisfied. Radharani Dutt was an attractive young girl, but Abai had never really liked her. He was thinking maybe a different wife would be better, a second wife besides this one. In India, it was socially acceptable to marry a second wife, so Abai decided to take the matter into his own hands. He made arrangements to approach the parents of another girl, but when his father heard about it, he called Abai and said, "My dear boy, you are eager to take a second wife, but I would advise you not to. It is Krishna's grace that your present wife is not to your liking. Take it as a great fortune. If you do not become too attached to your wife and family, that will help you in your future advancement in spiritual life." Abai accepted his father's advice. He wanted to obey his father, and he appreciated the saintly viewpoint, but he remained thoughtful, a bit awed by his father's forethought, and he wondered how one day in the future he would be advancing in spiritual life and be grateful that his father had done this. Your future advancement in spiritual life. Abai liked the idea. He reconciled himself to the wife he had been given. Abai Charanday's name was included on the posted list of students who had passed the Bachelor of Arts exams and who were invited to appear for the diploma. But Abai had decided he didn't want a diploma from the Scottish Church's college. Although as a graduate he would have a promising career, it would be a British-tainted career. If Gandhi succeeded, India would soon be rid of the British. Abai had made his decision, and when graduation day arrived, the college authorities learned of his rejecting his diploma. In this way, Abai registered his protest and signaled his response to Gandhi's call. Gandhi's protest had increased its pitch in recent months. During the war, Indians had remained loyal to the crown in hopes of generating British sympathy toward the cause of independence. But in 1919, England had passed the Rowlatt Act to repress the move for Indian freedom. Gandhi had then called on all the Indians to observe a Hartal, a day in which people all over the country had stayed home from work and school in protest. Although it had been a nonviolent protest, 1 week later in Amritsar, in the public square known as Jallianwala Bagh, British soldiers shot to death hundreds of unarmed, defenseless Indians who had gathered for a peaceful meeting. Gandhi then lost all faith in the intentions of the empire toward India. Calling for complete non-cooperation, he ordered a boycott of everything British: commodities, schools, courts, military honors. And Abai, in refusing his degree, was moving to align himself more closely with Gandhi's independence movement. But his heart was not in it. Just as he has never given his heart to college studies, to earning a degree, to his wife, so he was reserved about becoming a full-fledged nationalist. Abai had become inclined toward the cause, but never really convinced. Now, out of school, out of work, caring little for his career, education, or wife, he remained at home. He tried his hand at writing poetry for the occasion of a friend's wedding. He read Srimad Bhagavatam and the latest speeches of Gandhi. He had no immediate plans. Gurmohan had his plans for Abai, and the college degree had been an integral part of those plans. But Krishna, it seemed, had other plans. The political protest of refusing the Bachelor of Arts degree was more a mark of honor than a social stigma, and Gurmohan did not reproach his son for it. But Abai still needed to take up some kind of work. Gurmohan approached his friend Kartik Bose and asked him to employ Abai. Dr. Kartik Chandra Bose, an intimate friend, had been the family doctor since Abai's childhood. He was a distinguished surgeon, a medical scholar, and a chemical industrialist. He had his own establishment, Bose's Laboratory, in Calcutta, where he manufactured drugs, soaps, and other products for the pharmaceutical industry. Dr. Bose was well known throughout India as the first Indian to manufacture pharmaceutical preparations that had formerly been monopolized by European firms. He agreed to accept Abai as a department manager at his laboratory. Although Abai knew little of the pharmaceutical industry or of management, he felt confident that by reading a few related books, he could learn what he needed to do. But when this new young man was suddenly given the post of a department manager, several workers became dissatisfied. Some of them were elderly and had been 40 years with the firm. They voiced their dissatisfaction among themselves and finally confronted Dr. Bose. Why had this young man been put in charge? Dr. Bose replied, "Oh, for that position I needed someone I could trust like my own son. He's signing checks for 40,000 rupees. I can only entrust this personal handling of my accounts in that department to him. His father and I are very close, and this young man is known to me to be practically as my son." Gurmohan felt he had done his best. His prayer was that the principles of pure Vaishnavism he had taught his son would stay with him and guide him throughout his life. Gandhi and the cause of Swaraj had disrupted Abai's college career and Abai was still inclined towards nationalism, but not so much for a political motive as for a spiritual vision. So Gomarhan was content. He knew the marriage arrangement was not pleasing to Abai, but Abai had accepted his explanation that detachment from wife and family affairs would be good for spiritual advancement, and Abai was showing an inherent disinterest in materialistic affairs. This also did not displease Gomarhan, to whom business had always been subservient to his worship of Lord Krishna. He had expected this. Now Abai had a promising job and was making the best of his marriage. Gomarhan had done what he could, and he depended on Krishna for the ultimate result. Gandhi, bolstered by his emergence as a leader among the Congress Party, now openly attacked the empire's exploitive cloth trade with India. England was purchasing raw cotton from India at lowest prices, manufacturing it into cloth in Lancashire mills in England, and then selling the monopolized cloth at high prices to the Indian millions. Gandhi's propaganda was that India should return to making their own cloth, using simple spinning wheels and hand looms, thus completely boycotting the British-made cloth and attacking an economic base of Britain's power over India. Traveling by train throughout the country, Gandhi repeatedly appealed to his countrymen to reject all foreign cloth and wear only the simple coarse khadi produced from India's own cottage industry. Before the British rule, India had spun and woven her own cloth. Gandhi argued that by breaking the cottage industries, the British were sinking the Indian masses into semi-starvation and lifelessness. To set the example, Gandhi himself worked daily at a primitive spinning wheel and wore only a simple, coarse loincloth and shawl. He would hold meetings and ask people to come forth and reject their imported cloth. On the spot, people would throw down heaps of cloth, and he would set it ablaze. Gandhi's wife complained that the khadi was too thick and not too convenient to wear while cooking. She asked if while cooking she could wear the light British-made cloth. "Yes, you're free to cook with your mill cloth on," Gandhi had told her, "but I must exercise a similar freedom by not taking the meal that you prepare." The cause of cottage industry appealed to Abai. He, too, was not enamored with the modern industrial advances the British had introduced in India. Not only was simple living good for the long-term national economy of hundreds and millions of Indians, as Gandhi was emphasizing, but to Abai it was also the way of life most conducive to spiritual culture. Abai put aside his mill-manufactured cloth and took to wearing khadi. Now his dress revealed him to whoever he met, British and Indian alike. He was a nationalist, a sympathizer of revolution. To wear khadi in India in the early 1920s was not a mere clothing fad, it was a political statement. It meant he was a Gandhian. So that's the end of that chapter. And the next one is evidently when Prabhupada meets Bhaktivedanta, his spiritual master. So this book is very, very nicely written. It's very well written. It's very, very nice. Very, very, very nice. Very, very well written. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama. The devotees asked Satsvarupa, after Prabhupada disappeared, if he would please do the biography of Prabhupada. Why? What an honor, huh? He asked to do Prabhupada's biography. I'd given that service. He did so nicely. I heard a little, I don't know if we're going to read it later or not, but that when Satsvarupa, this was very early on, the very first initiations, nobody even knew what initiations were so much, but Prabhupada was starting to officially initiate some of his followers. And Satsvarupa was among some of the first ones. And the initiation ceremony was scheduled for the next day. But Satsvarupa, out of shyness or timidity or not feeling worthy or something, he didn't go. He didn't show up for the ceremony. When Prabhupada saw him again, he said something like, if I've got this right, he said, because Satsvarupa was feeling bad, he said, you love me, I love you. To try to help the young man not feel so bad and confused. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. So he did, he got initiated. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna. So we were reading The Kidnapping of Subhadra in Prabhupada's Krishna book. Summary study of the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, by His Divine Grace. This is who we're reading about, his early life in India before his preaching mission, and later, when he's in an advanced age, 70s, 60s and 70s years old, he's producing so many books under the encouragement and guidance and request from Bhaktivedanta, his spiritual master. If you ever get money, print books in English, especially English. Hare Krishna. That's a way to get back at the British, isn't it? Hare Krishna. Okay, so the kidnapping of Subhadra. Arjuna disguised himself. Subhadra is Krishna's sister. Vasudeva and Devaki, they gave birth to Krishna, Balaram, Subhadra, and Devaki also had 6 sons who were killed as soon as they were born. But Balaram was the son of... It's a little confusing how it worked, because it's not material. These aren't material. With Krishna, it's never material. So Balaram was transferred from the womb of Devaki to the womb of Rohini. So it appears, but he's still the son of Vasudeva. Hare Krishna. So Maharaj Parikshit was very anxious to hear more about Krishna. And so, after finishing the narration of Arjuna's kidnapping Subhadra, Sukadeva Goswami began to narrate another story as follows. So this conversation is taking place on the banks of the Ganges. Maharaj Parikshit is the grandson of Arjuna, and he's curious to hear about his grandfather, the great exploits of his great-grandfather, his grandfather, Arjuna, the great archer and pure devotee of Krishna. And Sukadeva Goswami is the son of Srila Vyasadeva, who has compiled all the Vedas and heard from his father the Vedas while he was still within the womb of his mother. His father was reading to him, narrating. And as soon as he was born, he took off and wandered into the assembly where Maharaj Parikshit was sitting there, wanting to know what is the duty of one who's about to die. He knew he was going to have to die or leave his body in 7 days. So all the great saints and sages had come to discuss transcendental topics to try to help the king prepare. And Sukadeva Goswami wandered into the assembly. He just heard the Bhagavatam from his father. He was in ecstatic trance. And everybody recognized, okay, this is the person that Maharaj Parikshit needs to hear from. So Maharaj Parikshit was very anxious to hear about Krishna, and after finishing the narration of Arjuna's kidnapping Subhadra, Sukadeva Goswami began to narrate another story as follows. There was a householder Brahmin in the city of Mithila, the capital of the kingdom of Videha. This Brahmana, whose name was Shrutadev, was a great devotee of Lord Krishna. Due to his being fully Krishna conscious and always engaged in the service of the Lord, he was completely peaceful in mind and detached from all material attraction. He was very learned and had no other desire than to be fully situated in Krishna consciousness. Although, in the order of household life, he never took great pains to earn anything for his livelihood, he was satisfied with whatever he could achieve without much endeavor. He was a householder, but he wasn't out there trying to make money. He was satisfied with whatever he could achieve without much endeavor. Somehow or other he lived in that way. Every day he would get necessities of life in just the quantity required, not more. That was his destiny. The Brahmana had no desire to get more than what he needed, and thus he was peacefully executing the regulative principles of a Brahman's life as enjoined in revealed scriptures. Fortunately, the king of Mithila was as good a devotee as the Brahmana. The name of this famous king was Bahulasva. So the Brahman is there in Mithila, and the king of Mithila is also a devotee, King Bahulasva. He was very well established in his reputation as a good king, and he was not at all ambitious to extend his kingdom for the sake of sense gratification. As such, both the Brahmana and King Bahulasva remained pure devotees of Lord Krishna in Mithila. Since Lord Krishna was very merciful upon these two devotees, King Bahulasva and the Brahmin Shrutadev, he one day asked his driver Daruka to take his chariot into the capital city of Mithila. Lord Krishna was accompanied by the great sages, Narada, Vamadev, Atri, Vyasadev, Parashuram, Asita, Aruni, Brihaspati, Kanva, Maitreya, Shravana, and others. Lord Krishna and the sages were passing through many villages and towns, and everywhere the citizens would receive them with great respect and offer them articles in worship. Boy, what a traveling entourage, huh? Lord Krishna traveling with all the saints and sages. When the citizens came to see the Lord, and all of them assembled together in one place, it seemed that the sun was present along with his various satellite planets. Yeah, the Lord traveling with all these saints and sages, it looked to the people that were seeing them pass by that it was the sun accompanied by all the satellite planets. In that journey, Lord Krishna and the sages passed through the kingdoms of Anarta, Danva, Kurujangala, Kanka, Matsya, Panchala, Kunti, Madhu, Kikaya, Koshala, and Arna. And thus all the citizens of these places, both men and women, could see Lord Krishna eye to eye. In this way they enjoyed celestial happiness, with open hearts full of love and affection for the Lord. And when they saw the face of the Lord, it seemed to them that they were drinking nectar through their eyes. When they saw Krishna, as the all the ignorant misconceptions of their lives dissipated, when the Lord passed through the various countries, and the people came to visit him, simply by glancing over them, the Lord would bestow all good fortune upon them, and liberate them all from all kinds of ignorance. In some places, the demigods also would join with the human beings, and their glorification of the Lord would cleanse all directions of all inauspicious things. In this way, Lord Krishna slowly, gradually, reached the kingdom of the Deha. When the news of the Lord's arrival was received by the citizens, they all felt unlimited happiness and came to welcome him, taking gifts in their hands to offer. As soon as they saw Lord Krishna, their hearts immediately blossomed in transcendental bliss, just as a lotus flower blooms on the rising of the sun. Previously, they had simply heard the names of the great sages, but had never seen them. Now, by the mercy of Lord Krishna, they had the opportunity of seeing both the great sages and the Lord himself. King Bahulasva, as well as the Brahmin Shrutadev, knowing well that the Lord had come there just to grace them with favor, immediately fell at the Lord's lotus feet and offered their respects. With folded hands, the king and the Brahmana each simultaneously invited Lord Krishna and all the sages to his home. So, because of the devotion of King Bahulasva and the Brahmin Shrutadev, Krishna and all the sages made that journey, and everyone who saw them along the way was liberated. That's because of the devotion and the love and devotion, pure devotion of King Bahulasva and King Shrutadev. So how powerful is that? Krishna was attracted to go and see these two devotees. And to do that, he traveled with the saints and sages through so many kingdoms. He traveled through Anarta, Danva, Kurujangula, Kanka, Matsya, Panchala, Kunti, Madhu, Kekaya, Koshala, and Arna. Traveled through all those kingdoms. And everyone who saw them along the way was liberated. And he's going there because of the devotion. He's attracted to the devotion of Bahulasva and Shrutadev. That's like Prabhupada. Because of Prabhupada's pure devotion for Krishna, there's so many temples everywhere. It's so much chanting going on. And so much devotional service. More and more every day, to increasing. And that's because of Prabhupada's devotion. Krishna is coming. With folded hands, the king and the Brahmin each simultaneously invited Lord Krishna and all the sages to his home. In order to please both of them, Lord Krishna expanded himself into two and went to the houses of each one of them. Yet neither the king nor the Brahmin could understand that the Lord had gone to the house of the other, but thought that the Lord had gone only to his house, that he and his companions were present in both houses, although both the Brahmin and the king thought he was present in his house only, is another opulence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So Krishna expanded, and so did all the saints and sages. Both thought that the Lord had gone only to his own house, that he and his companions were present in both houses, although both the Brahmin and the king thought he was present in his house only. This opulence is described in revealed scriptures as Vaibhava Prakash. Similarly, when Lord Krishna married 16,000 wives, he also expanded himself into 16,000 forms, each one of them as powerful as he himself. Similarly, in Vrindavan, when Brahma stole away Krishna's cows, calves, and cowherd boys, Krishna expanded himself into many new cows, calves, and cowherd boys. So how is it that the saints and sages were able to do this simultaneously here and there at the same time? Maybe Prabhupada is giving us a little hint here when he compares it to when Krishna expanded himself into the different cows, calves, and boys. Anyway, it's not discussed, but Hare Krishna. I think that's what Prabhupada's saying here. That Krishna himself expanded as the saints and sages. I think that's what he's saying. So that they could be in two places at once. Bahulasva, the king of the Deha, was very intelligent and was a perfect gentleman. He was astonished that so many great sages, along with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, were personally present in his home. He knew perfectly well that the conditioned soul, especially when engaged in worldly affairs, cannot be 100% pure, whereas the Supreme Personality of Godhead and his pure devotee are always transcendental to worldly contamination. Therefore, when he found that the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, and all the great sages were at his home, he was astonished, and he began to thank Lord Krishna for his causeless mercy. Feeling very much obliged and wanting to receive his guest to his best of his capacity, he called for nice chairs and cushions, and Lord Krishna, along with all the sages, sat down very comfortably. At that time, King Bahulasva's mind was very restless, not because of any problems, but because of great ecstasy of love and devotion. His heart was filled with love and affection for the Lord and his associates, and his eyes were filled with tears of ecstasy. He arranged to wash the feet of his divine guests, and after washing them, he and his family members sprinkled the water on their own heads. After this, he offered to the guests nice flower garlands, sandalwood pulp, incense, new garments, ornaments, lamps, cows, and bulls. In a manner just befitting his royal position, he worshipped each one of them in this way, and when all had been fed sumptuously and were sitting very comfortably, Bahulasva came before Lord Krishna and caught his lotus feet. He placed them on his lap, and while massaging the feet with his hands, began to speak about the glories of the Lord in a sweet voice. So, save that next time, because the sweet voice of King Bahulasva is going to be offering prayers. Quite a few prayers. So, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Just want to share something that happened last night in a group meeting that was, I can find it here, Krishna. So we're reading in Bhagavatam. Yeah, here it is. And in the purport, it's Canto 2, Chapter 10, Text 7, where it's being very definitively presented that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, not anybody else. That Krishna is the cause of all causes. Krishna, the personality of Godhead. Krishna. And in the purport, there's Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna. This famous verse, Krishna. There's another verse. Hare Krishna. Anyway, it got us into the discussion of the one word, iti. Sanskrit word, English transliteration, iti, iti. And it's this let's see, Brahmeti Paramatmeti Bhagavan iti Sabhyate. So, Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. Brahman is the impersonal aspect. Paramatma is the localized feature of the Lord. It's all Krishna, but different ways, different angles of vision. And Bhagavan, personality of Godhead. So the way it appears in the verse is Brahmeti, Paramatmeti, Bhagavan iti. And the devotee who was leading the discussion is a little bit familiar with Sanskrit. He's not like a big Sanskrit scholar, but a little bit. And he was explaining that word iti, when it appears on the end of a word, it's like a quotation mark. It's an emphatic punctuation kind of thing. In English, we would use quotation marks to make it stand out. But in Sanskrit, they put on the end, iti. Brahmeti, Paramatmeti, Bhagavan iti. So just that little kind of grammatical insight brought the whole purport to life, brought the whole verse to life, more to life. Because the verse is stating that Krishna is. So, Brahmeti, Paramatmeti, Bhagavaniti. It's emphasizing, which is something if you don't know Sanskrit, you wouldn't see. But if you knew Sanskrit, you would see it would jump out at you, like an exclamation point or bold capital letters. So just by him sharing that, it was really, it was nice. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. I don't know how many times I've heard that Brahmeti, Paramatmeti, Bhagavaniti subject. I've heard that like at least a zillion times if I heard it once. But when he was explaining what the iti is on the end, it made it stand out. Oh, wow. It's like if you're communicating in text and you put a smiley on there, a little emoticon to help whoever's receiving or seeing the text kind of get the mood behind the text. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Well, I wish I knew how to read Sanskrit. It would be so much more fun, you know. Prabhupada said, people will learn Bengali just so they can read Chaitanya Charitamrita. Because there's things in a language that just translations just can't do it. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. You always lose a little something in a translation. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. A little mood, a little flavor, a little exclamation point or quotation can make the whole thing even more vibrant. You know, has more vibrancy. So that's what I got out of that when he was explaining about that little word iti on the end. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna